The Bills adding Damien Harris. I think this is really interesting because Devin Singletary left and signed with the Texans, who we're going to talk about, by the way, after the break, Texans fans. His year, it was like a 1 year, pretty cheap deal, like under $4 million. Have the Harris numbers come out yet? But it's also a 1 year deal, right?
Yeah, and when the numbers haven't come out yet, Mina, it means it's probably like average or below what you'd expect it to be. That's just how contracts work.
So probably similar, right?
Yeah, maybe even less.
Which is interesting because essentially that's kind of why I find this so interesting, because the Bills, I think people think of them as having like this terrible rushing attack because we look for weaknesses with the Bills, and that is just a thing to point to. The reality is it hasn't been that bad. Last year, they finished second in passing DVOA, but 11th in rushing. And Devin Singletary, I was comparing Harris and him. There's numbers where Harris looks better. There's numbers where Singletary looks better, but context matters obviously so much for running backs. But I think there's been a sentiment for a long time that the Bills want to run the ball better and should be able to run the ball better because they should be able to, getting light boxes. And they obviously, with Singletary leaving, they still had Nyheim Hines and James Cook, but those are more like scat back types. They needed that every down bell cow back. So my question for you is, do you think this was smart? Do you think Damien Harris brings something to the table that maybe Singletary didn't? And why do you think that they chose him in particular?
I'm no Doug Kazarian, but I would, if there was a place that I could find that has like significant odds that, like if Damien Harris is probably like, I don't know, plus 3,500 to lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns next year.
Yeah.
I'd mess around with that.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because 2 years ago, he had 15 rushing touchdowns. I think he was tied for the NFL lead in rushing touchdowns in 2021. You've talked about all these backs that Buffalo has had. The common thread amongst them is that they are not hammerheads, which is kind of exactly what Damien Harris is. His skill set's fairly narrow, right? Like, not going to do much in the passing game. Haven't seen a bunch of different styles of running from Damien Harris. But, the Patriots last year did very few things very well. But in prior years when they were doing things well, one of the things they've always done a good job of is they just mash in the running game, right? Whether it's David Andrews, Shaq Mason, guys that have either been there, are still there, whoever it is, Trent Brown, Cole Strange, like those guys they put hands on bodies and they can move some people around. And Damien Harris is see hole, hit hole. That's the kind of runner he is. It has a lot of value for Buffalo because they're going to be in the red zone a lot because they have a very good offense. They need somebody that can get some like yards that go beyond what you are able to block for, right? That's the measure of a good running back, is not what he gets based off of how the offensive line blocks, but what he gets beyond that. Third thing I'll mention, I know that Josh Allen is a cyborg. At some point, though, you have to be mindful of the hits he is taking. That's just the reality of any quarterback, whether it's the very best ever to run, in my opinion, in Lamar, or whether it's a guy in Josh Allen who is awesome at running. But you have to protect him. Like, these guys are not, like, it just takes one hit to change the course of your season. And your window it's not closing anytime soon. But you play in the AFC.
Yeah.
Like, you can't afford to throw these years away.
And I mean, Cam Newton is right there, is the cautionary tale when it comes to using a quarterback the way the Bills have at times used Josh Allen. I actually think it probably needs to get brought up more. I always joke that the Bills' breaking case of emergency play is just quarterback draw. But it really is, Field. And towards the end, and because of Josh's style is similar to Cam's. It's not like Lamar where he's evasive and he's hard to bring down. Like, he seeks out contact and he's huge. But at a certain point, when you play that position and you're that good at it, it is not a good idea to have your quarterback take that much contact. And I think that, to go back to the beginning, why are we always so obsessed with the Bills' run game or lack thereof? That is a big part of it, because Bills fans don't want their quarterback to be the leading ball carrier at the end of games. They want a running back they can count on. By the way, you talked about getting yards beyond what the offensive line is blocking for. So Damien Harris, the previous year was a better year, obviously, but last year he still finished 12th in the NFL in the percentage of runs where Next Gen Stats has this. He gained over the expected yardage, and he finished 7th in DVOA, which accounts for opponent and situation. So advanced numbers do like his production a lot, which would seem to bode well for Buffalo.
3 last things. One, it's always easy for us to tell these quarterbacks, like, either don't run or be smarter as a runner. Okay, Josh Allen last year had like a like a totally jacked up elbow, and like a quarter later went and made like a sprawling tackle attempt that looked like he was going to decapitate himself, right? Like,
so upsetting.
It sounds good to tell these guys to chill out. It's a lot easier for them to actually chill out. 2, Damien Harris. I don't know that this is always a good way to go about things, but NFL teams love players that have crushed them in the past. Damien Harris has played. He's had a couple of vulnerable moments too. But Damien Harris in that game 2 years ago, Monday Night Football, had the long run against the Bills. Like, he's had some good moments against Buffalo. And 3, he's got a ton to prove, Mina, because he entered a contract year last year and had a substandard year and also was hurt. He understands. He's smart enough to know that, like, you get one chance to get a big contract as a running back in 90% of the cases. If he goes to Buffalo and has 900 rushing yards and 12 rushing touchdowns, this could be like a James Conner situation in Arizona, where he parlays one really good year into a very strong contract. If he doesn't, then we will be discussing journeyman Damien Harris for a while. And who would have thought that 2 years ago when he had, I keep saying 15. If it was actually 16, my apologies.
It was a lot.
15 rushing touchdowns in 2021.
Yeah. God, he's going to vulture so many this year. It's going to be infuriating for
Josh Allen stuck down in fantasy.
Before we move on to the next topic, though, just from a fantasy perspective, so I play Dynasty. One of the many moves that delighted me was my guy Miles Sanders going to Carolina, which I think is a great destination for a running back. We saw that the backs there were able to continue their production after McCaffrey was traded, in part because I think this is an ascendant offensive line.